Welcome, everyone, to the Spiritual Forum. I'm so glad you're here. I've got a great guest today. Can't wait to introduce you to him. But first, I got a quick run up. As you know, just want to give a big shout out to people who've been donated to the podcast. Really, really appreciate it. This is my ministry. It's a podcast ministry, and it's also a retreat and a prayer ministry. And it's a way of bringing joy and hope and inspiration and awakening to a world that is, in my view, in need of it. So I really appreciate that. If you want to be on my newsletter, please, you can subscribe at thespiritualforum.org. And I think that's about it. Oh, yeah. I have a survey. So I'm asking my listeners to tell me what you think about the podcast. That survey is available on thespiritualforum.org. Or if you receive the newsletter, it's right at the top. Just 2-minute survey to give me some feedback because I'm completely open. Really glad you're all here. So let me introduce you to my guest, Zac Lovas. He's the co-founder of Vegan Travel Asia by Voyages, which is a team of 5 friends from 4 different countries and different faiths who came together to create vegan tours that focus on bridging cultural gaps through cultural immersion with local communities while enjoying 100% local vegan food along the way. Starting with 3 trips in 2004, they now organize over 20 tours a year in 9 countries. Collaborating with local communities, they develop tours that are environmentally friendly, socially impactful, vegan, and cruelty-free. Can't beat that. That sounds fabulous. They also invest 50% of their profits into the communities that they work with through programs focused on social impact, animal welfare, environmental sustainability, education, and conservation. They are 2-time recipients of Asia's Responsible Tourism Award, and they've received a whole bunch of other awards. I'm not going to list them all here because they'll be here all day, but a few of them are Best Tour Operator in the USA, Best Sustainable Tour Company in the USA, Best Use of Sustainable in Culinary, Best Use of Sustainability in let's try that again. Best Use of Sustainability in Culinary Travel. And there's a whole bunch more. So welcome, Zac.
Thanks, Carol. Very great, great to be here. So very nice to meet you, and very. I feel honored that you gave me the opportunity to be on your podcast. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on. So the story behind this, before we kind of go into your story, is I do an annual retreat at Unity Village, and it's a whole planet spirituality retreat. And we're in our 3rd year, and this is really about bringing people who have some kind of spirituality to Unity Village, and it's Unity Village because that's where my ordination is, or at least one of them. And the founders of Unity practice ethical vegetarian living back in the early 1900s. And it was really about spiritual development and what we need to do to attain world peace and unconditional love, and from very much from our spiritual standpoint. So I have a retreat there every October, and it's really a retreat for people who are practicing vegans, or they are aspirational vegans, or we just had a whole bunch of non-vegans come this past year. And it was really, really great because we were just a loving community, and we just learned a lot and had great food and really appreciated the animals and all of that. Not meaning to focus on my retreat, but one of the people who've been at the retreat the last 2 years emailed me and said, I just got back from this great, great tour, and I hope you can interview Zac for your podcast. And so I'm like, okay. So I contacted you. So that's how we got you on the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Your retreat sounds great. Actually, I want to come on your retreat. So I'd like to know when the dates.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. It really is unique. It's very, very unique. It's in the heart of the nation instead of the coasts, so everyone thinks they're going to go retreat in California, New York, or Florida, or Vermont, or something, and it's right there in Missouri. But it's a beautiful
Nice.
place, and it is very. I'll send you all the information about that.
Thank you.
So, but anyway, I really want to start, as I usually do, is to ask you to tell me your story, your story, your spiritual story, or the story of you getting to where you are today. And we're not going to be here all day hearing your story. So whatever the touchstones are, and I'd also like to hear about some of the spiritual roots and those and all of that too. So I'll turn over to you.
Okay. Okay, it's a long journey, but I'll make it very short, and it's an evolving journey, as we know. So all of our spiritual journeys are evolving journeys, and I won't even say that we evolved annually; we evolve daily, as you know. But going back to the beginning, not really to the beginning, but basically, it started when I was before 14. But 14, I think I realized the biggest transformation, and that was when I became vegetarian. And before that, I became vegetarian originally for the animals, and obviously that is has been my motivation. When people ask you why are you vegan, is it for this or that or what have you? No, it's for the animals. I've always loved animals. And then at like many of us at the age of 14, it was like when I'm starting to make my own decisions, and I wasn't just going to follow along with what everybody else was saying. So that's when it began, and did not I did not fit in anywhere when I was growing up. So even as a young kid, it was the conflict between, like many of us go through. We can't see ourselves fitting in, so we try to fit in, and there must be something wrong with us because we're thinking things differently. We don't think and go in this direction, and so I didn't run away, but it was kind of like running away. I left school early. I started as a writer in children's television, and that was to get away from my background and where I grew up in. I grew up in a very conservative at that time. It's changed quite a bit now. A very conservative Orange County, California. At that time, it was like ranked as one of the most conservative counties in the United States. So I ran away to Hollywood, like many people do. And I thought that I could be, as a storyteller, you could change the world through films, which films are a great medium, as are books and music and everything else. And so that's when I first became vegetarian. Was at 14 years old because I loved animals. And then my journey went from there, and I was mostly vegan, but went completely vegan over a decade and a half ago, and it's continued in that direction. So how I got involved as far as on a spiritual level, I would say if I was going to be categorized as anything, a practicing Buddhist, and more focused in the Theravada Buddhism. And I didn't come to Buddhism until much later in my life, even though I learned about it when I was young. I first learned about it when I was in third grade. Um, my third grade teacher at that time said that Buddhists were satanic devil worshippers.
Oh
And
my.
so, yeah, so, and anybody else that wasn't a practice, again, Orange County, California. So anybody that wasn't a practicing Christian in certain schools of Christianity was all kind of grouped into that category. And then when I saw a couple of the kids in the classroom that I knew that were Buddhist, but obviously would never say that they're Buddhists, um, because they were living there. So I went back and I checked it out, and I looked in the books, and I thought, okay, the first thing I need to do is find the 10 Commandments of Buddhism, right? And I did, and I
Ah,
saw the five precepts. And the five precepts I looked at, and I was like, wow, the first one is abstain from killing. Abstain, compassion for all living beings. And then I went down the list of them, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of similarities here to the Ten Commandments. And at the same time, there's nothing here that really looked like the path of Satan. So that immediately made me start questioning everything. So, yes. And I went to eventually, so 14, went into writing for children's television full time. When I was 18, I got a film project opportunity to go to India. At that time, nobody else in our company wanted to go. The idea of leaving Hollywood to go spend 6 months in India was a frightening prospect for many people. To me, it got me further away from where I grew up. So I was like, as my parents used to say, you couldn't have went any further without coming back towards Orange County, because it's literally on the other side of the world. And I went there, and the first time in my life, as I was where I was based to do the project, was in a Sufi village. And obviously, the preconceived notions I had of Islam at that time, and I'll say again, growing up as a kid in conservative Orange County, California. So, and what I had as the interpretation of what Islam was very, very different than what I actually realized what it was. And then this was the Sufi school of Islam, the village that I was living in. It was right also next to a Sri Lankan Tamil refugee camp. And I was living in this basically hostel, because people from the village, this was the only place where there was a higher, like a higher secondary school, and then a polytechnic area where people could learn a trade nearby. So the kids the youth, I would say, would come in. They're my same age. I'm saying kids. That would come in from the different villages and everything. They would live in this kind of concrete hostel, and the room was basically no glass on it, and there was a hole in the floor for the toilet in the corner, and there was mosquitoes, and there was everything that I should have. That people were telling me that, oh, you're going to not last the 6 months there, and it was actually the first good sleep I ever had in my life. It was the first time in my life I actually felt like I was somewhere that was safer emotionally, if that makes sense, than what I grew up in.
Interesting.
And I never went back after that. I mean, I went back obviously, but I from then on I lived full time in Asia, and then my spiritual journey kind of developed from that point on even more, and in all different directions. But yeah, so and then
That's so
my
interesting.
more yeah, so that's it in a nutshell. I hope I didn't go on too long there. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, 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 no. That's all right. Some people go on for 30 minutes. That's too long.
Okay.
Um, so,
Yeah.
that's so interesting. I mean, that's such a big shift to go just to India and then feel comfortable right away. Very, very interesting. And in terms of your story, it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's similar to mine at all. I didn't go to India, but I became vegetarian at age 15. And it was,
Mhm.
I just remember that. I remember that moment in my kitchen of my home, and it was in St. Louis, and telling my mom, I'm not going to eat meat anymore. I'm not going to eat animals anymore. And I don't know why it took me so long, you know, but I think there's something about being a teenager and now, feeling maybe I had a voice or something, but the disconnect went on for a long, long time, and it was a really good choice. It took me a lot longer to go vegan, but um, I do want to kind of get to this going to India. So how old were you when you went to India?
18.
18. That's young. That's really young.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're this and you're writing shows for television at 18?
I
Children's
was.
television?
Yes, I was writing
Okay.
shows and then the film at a young age. Yeah,
And
that
then
was
they
me
sent you
running
to
away. Like, I guess there was a lot of people that I was even working with that they were older, but a lot of us had the runaway story. The story running
Right,
away to
right.
Hollywood.
That's fascinating. So you're 18 in India. I mean, to me, the culture's so different, everything's so different, but you didn't feel overwhelmed or anything like that.
No, which is weird because I thought I was trying to convince myself that I needed to, because again that idea that I, always being having these feelings, especially that you love animals, you want to protect this, you want all these kind of things, and not you didn't the whole kind of social structure, the bully and all that, you didn't really get into that whole the whole kind of social structure that you have going to school,
Uh-huh.
and then that kind of is, I would just say, reinforced at some of the by the adults, and I would even say, again, where I grew up, by the religious institutions. So everything was kind of a conflict. It was trying to find, how do I fit into that? There must be something wrong with me. And then all of a sudden
Yes.
there, I was this person that was very different from anyone else that was there. But at the same time, there was this whole, when we would sit down and we would talk, and this whole kind of more idea of acceptance and not in conflict with who I am, even though we're different, but wanting to know about each other more and being accepted in to different people's, communities, and to their societies. And it was something that I never had. And loads of misconceptions that were put into my head. I'll say programmed, because that's pretty much what it is,
Sure.
isn't it?
Yep. Hmm.
That was put into my head before, is like, wow, that was a lie. They had no idea. And I don't in defense of the teachers and the community I grew up with, I don't think it was anything intentional. Most of the time, actually, I think it was completely unintentional. It was just they did not know, and so they were told something and they believed it, and then they would pass what they were told on to somebody else, and so it's just that they didn't know. And so even it wasn't an anger part, it was more of a part that, wow, life is actually can be, and these differences and everything that we looked at as differences, or we were taught were differences, is so much more beautiful than what we were, and so much more full of, I would say, love and acceptance than a lot of what was put into my head. And it wasn't a conflict in it, but the idea of then just being open to that, and having that. and having that moment, or I would say moments, just it felt right, if that makes sense, because it wasn't this constant internal fight. And so it
Yeah.
felt like I didn't ever want to go back to that, you know. And then just the opposite, I wanted to learn more. I was like, there's so much more to learn. There's so much more I want to learn, rather than so much I want to walk around and try to judge or see if something fits into this box or that box. But so much more that I wanted to learn. And it actually opened in my mind, it opened the world up to me in a big way. Yeah, so that's why it felt so comfortable, because I didn't have that at all growing up.
That's so interesting. So I want to go on to what the next step is, but there's a few things I want to reflect on here. Um, First of all, I mean, I have learned on my spiritual journey that this feeling that I don't belong, because I've had this most of my life. I don't belong here. I don't belong here. These people aren't my people. I don't belong. They don't understand me. I used to think that that was some sort of this horrible feeling, like this. I don't like it. I want to get rid of this feeling. And it's really fairly recently where I have learned that I don't belong. That conclusion can really be empowering, because it's telling you you don't belong here. You belong. It's okay if you don't belong here. Find where you do feel like you belong. And that sounds like what happened with you. Like you didn't belong in Orange County with all of that was going on, but you did find that even with all the differences, you did belong someone else, and I somewhere else. And I don't mean that we should all be seeking, where do I belong? Because I'm not sure there's ever a place where I'm going to feel 100% comfortable around all of my people. But that feeling, I think, can be a positive and informing feeling, because it directs you to where you need to go, which is not where you're feeling those feelings. The other thing I want to reflect on is the conditioning. Yes, you were brainwashed. Yes, I was brainwashed. We've the whole education
Yeah.
system, all the systems, we are constantly fed lies, lie after lie after lie. Anybody who listens to me, anybody who's been a part of my ministry knows a big part of it is awakening to all of these lies. You're right. It's not like everyone was waking up and going, how can I lie to this child today? But we do continually pass on information and customs and prejudices and beliefs and all. And our job on the spiritual path is to question every single one of them. And so you find yourself in India with this completely, you're seeing these different religions, you're seeing these different kinds of people, and maybe where you came from, there were these judgments on these people, and you're saying that's not what I thought. It's not, this is
Yes.
something different. Yeah, very,
Yes. And
very
and you
interesting.
and used a good word, liberating. And it felt so liberating to know that, because it was like, wow, this whole time when I'm feeling so uncomfortable about myself growing up and how I'm thinking, and I must, I must be being possessed by something or someone because I'm thinking like this, or I must
Yes.
be, my genes are totally wrong, or whatever it may be. It was liberating to, like, wow, this was wrong what they were telling me. This was not correct. This was not, and that all of a sudden, that this cloud kind of opened up and I saw blue skies. So yeah.
It's like like I think before we started, I talked about how unity, we interpret the Bible metaphysically. It's like the Red Sea parted. it's like
Exactly.
it's like Exactly. It's like you had the huge block, but now you've got a clear path. So here you are in India, you end up doing this travel stuff. Do you want to talk a little
Yes.
bit about your 5 friends from the 4 different countries and how you got to that, or is there more you want to talk about in between,
Well, yeah.
well,
Well,
where
the
we
travel
left
stuff,
off in
how
there?
I came about, I've been, I'm not saying only been doing it, but only been doing it for 19 years. And before
Okay.
that, I went on film project, and I got on one other film project after another, both involved with film and media, and distribution. And so 19 years ago, I burned out on that. I completely burned out. And the biggest reason that I burned out is, of the whether it's a media story or a film story or news, what we were helping to facilitate, people would come over with preconceived notions. And this was all happening while I was in Asia. They'd come over with preconceived notions, and there could be 10 truths. And they would pick the 2 or 3 truths in there that backed up their hypothesis of whatever their news story. And I can tell you, from any production company or news agency that I worked with, they were all guilty of this. I did not, sadly, I
Mm.
did not work with one. I wish I did, or maybe I didn't, because then I wouldn't have burnt out. But that all had these preconceived notions, and they would take again, if there are 10 truths, they take like the three that backed it up. And even if the other seven contradicted it, they would like, okay, we're not going to even look at that. No, no, no. We're not going to even touch on that. We're not going to even present that side. And then, so then when that was happening in areas where there was conflicts, or whether it's, whether it's ethnic conflicts, communal conflicts, whatever it may be, capitalist conflicts. I mean, we can go down the list. Um, I was helping to facilitate that. And I was a part of that, I will say, that part of that machine. And obviously, I know if I remove myself from that machine, there's plenty of people that were just going to come in and put themselves into that position. So I know, but I just couldn't wake up and do that anymore. So the one part that myself and a couple of my partners liked still doing is that we enjoyed telling stories. We enjoyed the storytelling part. And more so, we enjoyed the bridging of cultural gaps between the foreign units that would come over and the local units. So bridging those cultural gaps and actually seeing that those moments of understanding, and I'll even saying, and certain prejudices kind of get erased, and preconceived notions and generalizations and everything go away. Those are the two things we really enjoyed. So we said, okay, how do we do that? And then how do we keep to our animal rights, our animal rights and our vegetarian beliefs? And so then we decided, okay, what if we do this? What if we create stories working with local communities? A lot of the communities that we had been working with before on the media and film projects, that we create stories that help bridge those cultural gaps. And we become like a medium for the communities to tell those stories that then our guests would live for the 1 to 2 weeks, or in some cases 3 weeks, while they travel with us, and then keep that all being vegetarian and then vegan, and then keeping to all that, keeping cruelty free, keeping nothing that's exploitive at animals. And at the same time, then we realized that would be also a cultural exchange, where then people could share those certain values and certain common ground ideas with each other. And then that's how we started 19 years ago. And we started with 3 trips in one country in India. And now we do, prior to COVID, we were doing 27 tours a year. We say 27 stories a year in 8 different countries. And now we do, this year, going to do 20 stories in 9 different countries. So, yeah. So that was how
So I
that
love
kind of
the
came around.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so I love the term stories for a tour. It's like an immersion experience, you're gonna be entering a story. I love that.
Yes.
That's so interesting, and do you market it that way?
We didn't before because we thought it would scare people, and then we decided, hey, this is what we do, and this is what the experiences people are going to go on. This is what the communities have put their time into. So let's be completely honest. It wasn't being not honest before, but let's not just market it as a trip, because we even think that even if somebody's not going to travel with us, hopefully even then by kind of reading on the way that we do it, that will motivate other travel companies, and we're hoping other vegan travel companies to do similar. And at the same time, it may kind of help people's approach on, okay, if they're going to go to another place over here, maybe there's a different way of doing it. It's not like, for us, it's never about building a holiday or a vacation. It's never about a series of sites that people are going to see. We literally create a story with local communities that help bridge those cultural gaps. And then at the same time, people will live those stories. We do classic storytelling as far as the first act, second act, third act, everything like that. And then everything else becomes part of that story. And then at the same time, we are able to help communities that otherwise, a lot of these communities that don't have tourism programs, develop sustainable tourism programs where people come in and they genuinely learn about the local culture. But also then there's that, every time somebody's learning about a local culture, there's also a cultural exchange. It goes both directions. And so that's what we wanted to do. So then we did, how many years ago, we did start then saying, okay, let's just be honest in our in our process, as far as on the openness of the process. People realize our process when they come and travel with us, but let's be honest about it before. And one of our people in our company, one of our partners, one of my close friends said, yeah, and then this way, if people aren't looking for that, they don't come there. They were like, oh, wow, this is totally different than what I was looking for. So that's how we kind of,
Right,
and that's why you'll
right.
see, like on our website, our itineraries are much more detailed usually than a lot of other travel itineraries. And I think our web designer says, can you shorten them down because your optimization score is not good. We're like, no, this is part of the process. So they know about it before, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like a cultural immersion, and
Yes.
cultural in all ways. You're meeting people and hearing about their lives and their stories, and you're immersing yourself in that and their food and everything. Is that
Correct.
right? Okay. But
That is
you
correct.
do
That's, yeah.
yeah. Go ahead.
And we have through lines in the story and goals and everything, and even we have and even when we're telling the story, we in addition to kind of the classic storytelling structure, we also have certain things that we've realized over the years prior to this of what differences people have, and we actually call it relatable. We actually have a way of doing it. We make sure that then these elements are all these story elements, plot points as such, are all kind of incorporated in the stories that the communities are telling for people.
Okay. So for people who are listening who haven't been on your website, is there something, could you explain one of these stories in a way so that people who are listening could understand what we're talking about?
The relatable part, or just a story in itself?
Whatever
Because
you
we
want.
Okay.
Go
So what
ahead.
we do is, so we'll with the different communities will kind of that represent, I would say, different parts of that country or the cultures within that country. It's always cultures within a country, mostly, or communities within a country. It's not a single, obviously, as we know, it's not a single culture. It's not a single community.
Mhm.
But all these cultures and communities are part of making that country what that country is today, of what people are understanding of that country and the people in that country to this day. So we will go with from each of the different communities there, and we will. The first thing we do is we ask them, what what do you want people to know about your communities, and where have you been, and where you come from, where are you going, where, as far as on a kind of more of a, how would you say, on a more customs, rituals, traditions. We There's so much. If we look at even the things that the certain conflicts that people are having here culturally, and within cultures and communities in America, similar is happening everywhere around the world. We have so much more in common than we do different. And so we want people to explain that, to let people know from their point of view, not from the tourist brochure point of view of what a country, when you're going into somewhere, but actually from the community's point of view. And there's a lot of stuff that's really great. There's the triumphs, and of course, there's the tragedies. And so we want to hear from the communities of what they want that will help people to understand that. And we do that through a relatable system. And just for reference, the first one, can I go over this real quick? I'll try to go over it as quick as I
Sure.
can.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
we got time. This is important.
Okay. So we consider, like, there's like the big nine cultural attributes that people unfortunately often see as barriers and walls, and that's because they have been used by divisive barriers by politicians, religious leaders. We can go down the list, right? So
Yeah, we know that. It's
yes,
all the
so
psychopaths.
exactly. So the first one we call is R is for religion, of course, and that's one of the big ones. And it's, and but religion, communities have been linked by religion because mostly you'll find much, especially in Southeast Asia and South Asia, by trade and tradition, among others. It has helped to define, unite, and separate societies and communities equally, as we know. It's provided codes of
Mhm.
conduct, living and at times adapting to local norms and transforming itself in morals and cultures, but equally challenging and changing them. And it's constantly evolving. And so we like to present in the story the meanings, whys, hows, whats, and whens behind beliefs, and the uncanny kind of similarities and threads that are all between them. So that's one. Another, of course, is eating. Eating, as anybody knows, cuisine is like a gateway, like language, into a local culture or community. And we do that through from enjoying a local home cooked meals with families and learning how to prepare their local generational kind of recipes that have been passed down and down, to helping out at family farms, learning about the local dining etiquette, history, heritage, and connections that from centuries of also intermingling of people. It's never been separate. If you even look at how dishes are, even and what ingredients are used and why they make things this way, it actually has to do with the intermingling of people, often through trade, which is then developed, and through cultural traditions and what have you. Um, so kind of understanding on how their local cuisines have become what they are today. Next one is language. We have daily language lessons. that are taught. We have words of the day cards like this. This is for Lao, sabadi. And we have daily language lessons and kind of everything in the cards that we go over. And the link between languages and history is also, it's huge. And the community interactions, what communities have interacted with each other, what words have been adopted in, how this language has transformed. How do you trace language to also people's movements over, not just decades, not just centuries, but over millennia. And again, back to trade as well, and the universal quest for the meaning, politics, prayer, power, everything you can find in words and where they've been adapted from and how they've come in, scripts as well. And again, it does show not so much the differences. The more you learn about languages, the more you see the commonalities. So that's our REL. So now we're up to arts. I'll go quicker on this just as we go
That's
through.
okay.
It's
We've got time.
the arts is like from traditional dance to contemporary village folk music to local artisans, alternative musicians, and filmmakers. And we learn firsthand from those who have dedicated their lives to keep these arts alive, and the stories, traditions, and social commentaries and the deep roots that they convey, as well as, again, the intermingling influence. I want to say that because there's so much different influence from the people that people have been in contact with through centuries again. The next one is obviously traditions, customs, rituals from personal, family, generational, community points of view, which at time we see the traditions, again, a lot of similarities, a lot of differences, but again, even within the differences, you see the similarities and the commonalities, and which at times are in sync, but as with the generation to generations, are now sometimes getting debated and are at odds, but they're constantly evolving. Which leads to cohesion and separation at the same time. It leads to unity and divide and everywhere in between. The next one is, of course, attire, the way that the people dress, from traditional dress and influences, and the practicalities behind it. There's so much practicalities behind how local communities dress. But then at the same time, there's also a lot of traditional, and which people have settled into those areas over decades, over generations, over centuries. And then at the same time, as we're going, obviously, between generations on what people are wearing. And the kind of the community, spiritual, and progressive threads, no pun intended, between all of them. The next one would be building and architecture. Again, huge influences that from all different people, different cultures, similarities, even within the differences, differences within the similarities. Even on the material that they use, the way that the designs were done, everything like that. Learning, as we know, is a big one. Education. How are education systems, curriculums, how are they developed? How are they set? We see the conflict that is happening with them in our own country and, in America here, while similar things is happening all around the world and obviously what we learn and what we see history as is based on those who have, obviously, how would you say, depending on what perspective and what side of history you're on. And those are
Those
changing
who've
and constantly
brainwashed
evolving.
us.
Exactly, exactly. And they say it's often written by the winners, but it's also often written by just a few of the winners and those that obviously have certain interests and what have you there. And then that
Yeah.
transformation of how it's rewritten and history is rewritten and rewritten. And all of that obviously takes place where? In our educational systems, you know. And E, then for etiquette, which is defined by tradition, customs, and social structures, the hows, whys, and whens behind that. So all these, so now we're done with relatable. All those elements we put in with the communities as far as we help them bring those elements out into a story and the story that they want people to learn. And we strongly believe that once people learn about each other and get to know more about each other as individuals, that these traditional cultural attributes, which many politicians as well as religious leaders see as walls and differences, rather we start to see as similarities that we all share in a positive, meaningful, and hopefully respectful light. So I'm sorry I went on long on that one.
Oh, no, you
So,
didn't. It's so interesting. It's really a different travel paradigm. I mean, it's so different. I've taken one trip that did maybe like 5% of that, and it was fabulous. But this whole full immersion thing is fascinating. I um I just think it's so unique. I am curious though, because it sounds like you and your friends all had the same values when it came to cruelty-free and and respecting the animals. I would guess though you would go into some of these communities and some of their traditions and all would include the use of animals or the butchering of animals or the use of their organs and their fur and all that and all. So how do you handle that? What do you do?
That's a good question. What we do, the biggest thing we do is we try to focus on what our common ground is. And even within the communities that are doing stuff like that, we do find that we do have a lot of common ground. And there is a lot of compassion, even for animals and for the environment. It's just that some of these traditions and customs have been very much a part of that. So what we do is we put that aside. We say, okay, and when our group is here, we won't obviously we will not have that where people will be exposed to that, and we're going to focus on the common grounds we have. And then at the same time, even with some hardcore, what people would say hardcore, like the hardcore non-veg community in Indonesia, for example, are known as
Mhm.
the Batak people. They're hardcore non-veg, as they're known as, even within other Indonesian communities, which has over 360 plus different ethnic communities. And they even know, like, oh, the Batak, they're hardcore non-veg. But then what we do is we focus on what the Batak's traditional balance has been with nature, what their dishes have traditionally been as far as what they grow in their area, and then the non. It's actually we like let's say for example when we're veganizing their dishes, we veganize every single Batak dish that is would be the most common home Batak dishes. Let's say we have um, and we did that, and it only takes actually removing about two ingredients. Removing meaning
Mm.
from the recipe, saying, okay, we're going to remove this and we're going to replace this with this. Well, in Indonesia, that's easy to replace with because they have tempeh, which is great. It's a great replacement. They also, and then of course there's tofu, and then there's also mushrooms and stuff like that. There's genkol and other things. So we would veganize their dish, and usually, again, in that process, it would be um, the amount of from their recipe, the traditional family recipe, removing one or two items and substituting those easily with other items. And then what we do is in their home kitchen is we cook that together, and then we have them taste it, and they taste it, and we want to get it as close to what their family recipe is as possible, and we're able to do that. And then it's along that journey, it's we actually realize they're like, well, this is how we mostly ate when I was growing up back in the village, or when we were growing up younger because we couldn't afford meat. So meat was something that we only
Ah,
had once a week or twice a week. So we did a lot. So there's this whole then kind of bridging of understanding, and then all of a sudden, even from our point of view, they're like, oh well, you're not these kind of religious vegan fanatics, because and why I say religious vegan fanatics is because it's kind of interesting. When I first was in going to Indonesia, and people would know you're veg, right? Whether you're vegetarian or vegan, they would know that they'd be like, "Oh, you must be a Buddhist or a Taoist." It was immediately, "Oh, you're a religious group," right? And when I would go to Sri Lanka, the Buddhists, the Theravada Buddhists would say, "Oh, you must be a Hindu," because it's very very rare to find a Sri Lankan Theravada Buddhist vegetarian or vegan. It's changing, but back in the day. So, oh, you must be a Hindu. But then, of course, the Hindus have a heavy dairy. So sometimes it's more difficult to veganize the Hindu dishes than it is
uh-huh.
the Sinhalese dishes because of the use of the dairy product so much in it. Um, and then when I was in India, they said, "Oh, that's some Western propaganda that's brought in to infringe on the Hindus." So matter of fact, just right now, we have a big event coming up in Indonesia by the Vegan Society of Indonesia, total grassroots local organizations, and the Indonesian Vegetarian Society. The pushback, it was going to be in Jakarta, and then we were going to have a day or so event down in Bali. But Bali, the Balinese Hindu uh, community representatives hierarchy would say, they have objected towards it because it's for a local. It's done by locals for locals because of the association that they think it will be a conflict with adat, which is local culture, because Balinese Hindus are not vegetarian, and the ones that they're I won't name the organizations, but there's organizations within Indonesia that are garnering a lot of support from locals that are local vegetarian organizations that have a spiritual backing. So why I say that is because in the largest Muslim country in the world, you get before it was okay, you're a Buddhist for being veg, and then in the primarily Buddhist country of Sri Lanka, you're a Hindu for being a veg, and so it goes down the list. But why I going full circle? Then these misconceptions then are there. It's like, wow, okay, this is not so different. There's no spiritual level as far as religious organized religion level of us. This is like what we were eating like in the village, and you do that now, and these are the reasons you do it. There's the ethical, the environmental, et cetera, et cetera. But that whole barrier then gets broken down, and there is that cultural exchange that happens. So, and a matter of fact, some of the best
Really,
Batak food that we have in Indonesia on our trips is in Sumatra, and it's made by nuns, Catholic nuns, and they make great Batak. And they're like, we're using the same recipe we almost used to use back in the village. Um, and Sister Florentina and the other sisters, they make it so good, and it's really good. So we veganized with them. We had a lot of fun, and they're like, "This is just how we used to cook back when we were growing up." So
very interesting. So what I'm seeing is you're not going in there and imposing like, we're here now and this is how we're going to do it. So you're really gently approaching people and working with their culture and their background, their family recipes and all of that, and kind of getting a buy-in. And out of that, it is interesting that you're influencing to restoring themselves back to their own history, because I do think that this whole meat thing, you can kind of see it around the world where it's like, oh, the rich do meat, so we need to do meat, and isn't it great we can do meat now? But they were completely happy for centuries eating a certain way,
exactly,
and it's this kind of a Western influence, that eating meat is this Western influence. Yeah, and what isn't
yeah,
there a lot of
big
stuff going
time.
on in India now? Go ahead.
No, no, I was going to say in big
As
time,
it,
like they were saying, this is how we cooked, and this is how we used to eat, growing up, and yeah, so
yeah,
it's kind of it's so that whole learning process, I find it's extremely rewarding on a personal level.
yeah, yeah. Do you have a favorite immersive tour yourself?
Um, that's a good question. No, not for a bad reason. It sounds like a diplomatic reason, but the actual reason is because each one is a different story, and each one being a different story is a unique experience
Right.
for me, and that I love to relive and relive and relive. And I am so blessed that I get a chance to do that. I get a chance to do that every year, is relive these stories, and I feel so grateful for that. Actually.
It's so fascinating. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about your five friends from four different countries and different faiths? Just kind of, you don't have to give me their names or anything, but it's interesting that you all found each other and decided to do this together, because it sounds like you started off with a lot of diversity.
Yes, the three of us actually we're in the film business together, and we used to do films. The very R.K. Singh, who is the Singhji, is which we call him affectionately. He was the first film that I came on to work there. I went to meet him because he was referred by people we knew who had done a couple movies in India, and they said, "Look, if you're going to Rajasthan, you need to meet this man, and you need to meet R.K. Singh. He's great." And so, on my first very film that I went there, I met Singhji, and he was our location manager, and we became best friends, family, and we have been working together ever since.
And so
And then
what
my
would
brother,
his nationality and what
he's from
was
India.
his faith? He's from
He's
India.
from India,
And is he Hindu?
he's Hindu, correct? Yeah.
Okay.
So he is Hindu.
Okay, then
And
the
then
next one.
Okay, and then there's Sofna Yusi, and she is from Indonesia, and she was raised Muslim Christian. It's kind of her family with both. So she was raised as a Muslim and as a Christian. She'd go to mosque, she'd go to church. So that's how she was raised. Um, and then uh, and then there's who later came into the picture, but who's become a great friend. And actually, we first met through activism. Is Suresh, who is a Hindu in Nepal, and he's fantastic. And then there's also now Kuku, that's his nickname, who was RK's son. He's a Hindu. I myself. Sorry, there was my brother. My brother sadly passed away. He was
Oh,
independent agnostic, and then there's myself, who is a Buddhist. So, and then there
okay,
is now
interesting.
Shoba as well, who we're very happy to be part of the team. She's fantastic, and she's an activist from traditionally from a Hindu family, but I would say more independent.
Okay.
So
Okay, okay. All right. And it sounds like your stories, your tours also uh, have a value of sustainability as well.
yes, yes, completely. And the idea is there's on two levels. First. 50% of all the profits that we make go into community projects. And those community projects are actually our Veg Voyages Foundation. That's why some people ask, there's Vegan Travel Asia and there's Veg Voyages. What's the difference? So the difference between that is, one is the foundation, and the foundation has no overhead. It has no marketing overhead. It has no officers overhead. It has not every dime that goes in to our foundation goes directly into community projects. And these community projects are based with no fees, nothing. They're just directly into the community projects that we help communities develop. And those range from compassionate education to doing induction stoves in communities to bring down the carbon, as well as to help women with the respiratory problems. I'll get into that in a second. To films, to other educational projects, to spay and neuter projects, to helping protect marine life reefs. We can go down the list. I'd say to doing vegan food relief, which we did a lot of during in COVID. There's so many projects that we get involved in with the communities, and what we do is we go in with the communities. We ask them, what do they need? What are the problems that they're facing? And then we try to come up together with things about how we can help with the limited resources we have. So everything from our foundation, 100%, every dime, every dollar goes into those projects. So how does that get funded? It primarily gets funded through the Vegan Travel Asia. So 50% of all our profits goes to the foundation. The foundation then puts those directly into the projects, or of that 50%, it directly goes in directly to the communities, not even with the foundation, but during the tours and stuff, we put directly into the communities, into local projects, their educational projects and what have you. So
Very
that's
cool.
how
Yeah.
we can give back as much as we can. But at the same time, what we try to do is we try to make sustainable programs that, even after these programs that we develop, a lot of times in areas that they have not had tourism, we encourage them to do these programs outside with, sorry, sorry, I turned that off. Okay. I
I
thought I
know. It's
turned it off.
always forget to put it on airplane. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
with communities, that we encourage them to do these same programs with other companies or other individuals or individual tourists. So it's like, okay, these programs that we've developed, you continue to do these, because it's a great way for them to do outreach, to introduce people to their communities, to their cultures, and at the same time, it's a good way for them to make some extra income, which obviously these communities are very much could use. And those extra incomes usually are going into, like, the women, or what would they call in Nepal, the mothers associations or women associations, or the community development organizations, or associations that are for the welfare of the community or the society, different societies in the area. So that's how we try to make it as not just sustainable, but long-term sustainable, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I'm thinking about this whole experience that you're providing for people. I had this question. I was wondering if you had any spiritual practices as part of your tours. I mean, do you have times where people are introduced to the spiritual practices of the culture? And I do want to hear that answer. But before I even get that answer, I'm thinking that the whole thing is a spiritual experience, whether you have
Thank you.
spiritual practices or not. It really is, because you're opening your anybody who steps into this is opening their heart up to connecting with other people, other cultures. They're opening themselves up to releasing preconceived notions. These are all spiritual practices, as far as I'm concerned. Loosening up some of that programming, having it opening it up to what's possible here, and then experiencing this kind of deeper connection with people, across the globe, who are just have a whole different thing going on, and also a very similar thing going on, as we
Thank
really
you.
connect with our humanity. So to me, the whole thing is a spiritual experience. But to answer my question, are there spiritual practices that happen in these story tours?
Yes, we believe, as we believe, a big part of, obviously, of relatable, number one is religion, right? In the relatable list. So we introduce them to what the faith is. So the community is there, whether it's at the national, like in Malaysia, it's at the National Mosque, and we have the Islamic outreach in there, and they introduce the whole program about what Islam is, how it's practiced here, how it got here. To also then teaching people about Vipassana meditation, having Vipassana meditation sessions. Like when we're in when actually in quite a few of the areas, but including when we're in Nepal, when we're in Sri Lanka. So there's the introduction to the religion as itself, its history, how it's practiced locally, how it actually came to be there, and then at the same time, certain of those practices that are done. And so we kind of combine that. When we before we're in Indonesia during Ramadan, we would actually then go join a local family for breaking the fast. So, and they would make up a vegan feast for us. Um, I liked how you said it's a part of on an open mind. One of the biggest things that we say to everybody, we say at the beginning of our trips, as well as we always say, bring your passport. The two most important things, or I guess it would be three, the two most important things you can bring is a passport and an open mind and an open heart. We like to categorize that as one thing because an open mind is an open heart.
Hmm.
An open heart is an mind,
Right.
both directions. So, and a passport. That's what you need. Everything else you can get. Everything else you can find and get along the way. But those two things you need to bring. And there's a lot that we cover because even though a 2 week story seems like, oh, that's a long time, it's not. I mean, there's so much as whether you live in an area for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, 20 years, or what have you. There's something we're always learning, right? So what we do is also along the way, and everything that they're learning, they all have a storybook that they can follow. So this is like for Laos, right? So then in here it goes day by day, and we have story quotes and everything, so they can reflect on it. So they read. We tell them to read the day's story the night before, and then when they go home, they can kind of reflect for recalling. We also have. I'm sorry, it's not like I have props here, but okay.
That's
We
okay.
also have we have like we have religious cards. Religious cards meaning like this is one is on Theravada Buddhism, and so this is a set. There's like 4 different cards here. We laminate them, and then we put the hole punch here so they can put them on a ring. So they have a book set that they can go back. They can share them. It's going to handle the wear and tear, no problem. But it does everything from like. Some like what is the religious structures, what is each part of it, because then they realize, oh wow, there's a lot of similarities to the religious structures I have back home, and the same reasons, to what the history of it there, to the customs and everything, to meditation. So we, along the way, to curry. This is for in Thailand, Kang curry, to the history of curry and all the different types of curry. So okay, so they have this whole card set that gets developed over time, over the duration, and they have their itinerary that they can reference to, and they have their where is it? Sorry, there we go, and they have their language cards. See, so which has
Nice.
the local script and everything there. So all these things that even though they're learning and there's a lot to take in, that then when they go home they can kind of reflect over it and go over it again and again and have that recall. And that recall is not, again, what we say, it's not important what they take in up here. For us, what's important is what they take in here. This is what lasts. And that's
Yeah.
the connection we hope to try to reinforce. So
Yeah, the heart. Yeah, beautiful. Well, we've got probably about 5 more minutes. I don't know if you have more you wanna share. I have a little curiosity. Are you involved in a film being made right now in India? Did I hear that?
mother's
Would you like
milk,
to
Maa
talk
Ka
about
Doodh.
that a little bit?
Sure,
Yeah.
I'd love to talk about it. Thank you. So it's Maa Ka Doodh means mother's milk. And this is a film project. When we worked on the Vegan India conference with an organization called Vegan First and my friend Palak Mehta, back in 2019, we decided, okay, let's have a conference. Let's bring together a bunch of people there. They can talk with local activists. We can all share ideas. One of the people that we brought there is a great filmmaker known as Keegan Kuhn, who of course was a co-director on Cowspiracy, What the Health, and the Medicine as a producer. And so we were hoping that when he came there, and the idea would be, okay, it's not so much from what the people are going to watch to learn, but hopefully inspire local filmmakers or local activists to make a similar movie. So I will make it a short story. So he came there, he did a great job, motivated lots of people, which was great. And then after the vegan, this was in 2019, the Vegan India conference, and after that, I was trying to follow up. Our film, did we motivate someone to make this movie? To not make necessarily the cowspiracy of India, but to make a film that deals with the dairy industry, which is the dairy disaster, as we like to call it in India.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, big time. And then as it would, I called Pollock, my friend. I said, Pollock, do you know? Because she would know. And I said, did anybody from there? Do you know of any of that movie being made? And she said, well, no, not really. But there's a couple people that were in the process or talking that I heard about. So I said, okay, if you can give me their numbers. So then one of the people, I talked to everybody of the numbers I had, but one person stuck out to me, and that who has become a very close friend, Harsha, was was doing it. It was developing a project, and he wasn't sure. First, it was going to be a series of kind of shorts on it, or this or that. But when I talked to him, his story ideas and his approach and his research and most of all his passion, I would say was contagious. And I said, Harsha, let's do it. Let's just make this movie. So then let's make it as a feature, and let's tell it the story from beginning to end, and cover all the questions, all the I will say the excuses, all the myths. The myths are huge, and we did, and he's a fantastic director. He's actually from someone that came from the film business long ago, my past life. It seems like he was the best director I've ever worked with, and his passion and his storytelling it was great. So very proud of the film. And it is called Maa Ka Doodh. It's being shown at like kind of a different theaters and public screenings and campus screenings and everything across India right now. It's shown at some festivals as well, at the Jaipur International Film Festival, won Best Documentary, Best Director, Best Screenplay, which is fantastic because we didn't think even an Indian festival would pick up this movie because of the controversy, and the dairy industry is so influential and powerful in India.
Yeah.
But not only did this film festival pick it up, but they gave it these awards, so very cool. And in addition to that, it's free, available to see. We wanted everybody to see it. The idea is not there's no not I would even say a pesa of profit thinking on this. We wanted everybody to see it, so we were like, okay, if it goes on Netflix, Netflix only has this amount of percent of the market, which is a very small percent. All the streaming channels do, and the Amazon Prime only has this. So that's not the idea. Is we want everybody in India to know somebody that's seen the movie or has seen the movie, and so we said, okay, what is that? We just make it free on YouTube, and we have these public screenings, and every time we say, hey, if you liked the movie or if you hated the movie, let your friends see it. And so that's what we're doing. That's where it's showing now. But people can watch it on YouTube. There's an English version. There's the Hindi version. The English version, surprisingly, on YouTube has age restriction on it. I don't know why, but maybe because of some of the content being graphic.
Yeah.
But the Hindi version does not. So, and we also have a version coming out now that's going to be in Tamil. We have a version with it's also going to come out in about 6 or 7 different language or dialects in India as well. So yeah, and the
Okay, so
more
I
and
would
it's
like go ahead.
I was going to
No,
say
go ahead.
it's very we try to present the story as factual based. We actually had how would you say like town hall at that time. It was during COVID, so we made this all during COVID. Even the units, Harsha was there with his team traveling around in India. This was during COVID, so even during this time, they traveled over 20,000 kilometers actually, and doing interviews and doing all that. But what we did is we actually did town halls on Zooms from people from different communities, different economic classes, different dietary backgrounds, everything. And we asked the questions, all these questions that we thought, what would hold somebody back from doing this, or what do they believe on dairy and how their dairy comes to be on their table or in their glass, and also on what do they think about the idea of not having it, and so we got all that we made sure to answer every one of those questions in the movie. And so it goes from a cultural point of view, history point of view, and it's a lot of what they call it myth debunking. Myth it erases the myths. It clears the room. We
Mythbusters.
present Mythbusters, exactly. And we present
Yeah,
the
yeah.
value, and then it's up to people. We don't tell them to go vegan at the end. We just say now you have the information. Most of it,
You've got
a
the
lot of the
information. Yeah.
yeah, it's information. You're aware. You have these things that are government data that's from the Indian government as well as other agencies, but that's data now. You know how it happened, so now you can make your own decision and based on. But at least you're aware, and that was the key. Is because when we had these town halls, we were shocked about how unaware and what myths people had about how that dairy comes to their table, and to how
Right.
that is
I
linked
think
to their
those
culture.
myths are everywhere.
Yes,
The myth about dairy is everywhere. I know it's big in India, and it is everywhere, and I'd like to have a link to your movie and also a link to your travel sites and your foundation. I'll put that on the website and the YouTube channel and on the podcast pages and all of that so that people can learn about that because I think dairy in India is something people do not know much about and it is a big deal as it is here but it's
it is.
I
Yeah.
think people it's something a huge thing for people to be aware of. I'm really glad that your target audience is India.
Yes,
you
yeah,
know
and again, there. I mean, it's the largest dairy producing country in the world, and they
Yep.
also are usually in the top three or top five. Some and usually on the topper part, the higher part of that scale of being the largest beef exporters, bovine exporters in the world, and that
Yeah.
is no myth. It's not a
I
coincidence.
know.
It's all
It's not.
interlinked.
I know.
Yes.
Right.
And even
Right.
we're the largest vegetarian country in the world. And what we found is it is true that the non-vegetarians are cleaning up after the vegetarians, and
Yeah.
that's a scary statement to make. But when you look at the
Yeah.
data, it's the truth. And but they're not able to even clean up after the vegetarians good enough where then they even get that high on the bovine export. So
Yeah.
it's yeah. I
And
mean,
that
the
brings
amount of
us
stuff.
all the way back to the very beginning when we were talking about the 10 commandments and the Buddhist precepts, abstain from killing. We've come full circle.
Yes, exactly. And when people ask me, when I'm in Sri Lanka or when I'm in Laos or in Thailand, and people ask me why are you a vegan, and I say, well, the first precept. That's it. That I mean, in the sense,
There's one
I
there's
love
one
that.
there's one I know there's one law, there's one universal law, and that says don't harm anyone on purpose.
Exactly.
Don't purposely harm anybody. That's
Yes,
all we have to do. We don't need any laws, governments, anything. It's just follow that and we'll be fine. So
exactly.
anyway,
Yes. The
yeah,
first precept:
I
don't
am gonna
manipulate anyone.
close.
Okay.
Yeah, I am going to close, Zach. It was a real pleasure. Maybe I'll have you back on to hear more about the movie and other things. But I'm real excited about the business. I'm excited about the travel opportunities you're offering, the spiritual immersion, the experience, the connection, the opening the hearts, the teaching people about their oneness. It's really really wonderful work. Thanks for sharing it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Carol, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here. And it's been great talking with you. Thank you.
It was really really fun. Thank you, and thank you everyone for listening. I now close the Spiritual Forum.